Hello folks, this is Steve AB4L. I'm not originally from North Carolina, I'm from somewhere up north. And in the small factory town that I grew up in, that had a large immigrant influx 120, 130 years ago and continuing, including both sides of my family. The town is at least 50% Catholic. Where the house I grew up in, if I looked down the street that way, was a Congregational church. But it was a corner like this, and if I looked down, literally if I looked at the other end, that was the Notre Dame Catholic Church. If I turned around from the direction of looking at the Notre Dame Church and looked past the backyard, across the railroad tracks, across the felt mill, across the pond to the hill beyond, it was what was called the Irish Church, the Immaculate Conception Church. And so I've heard of the Knights of Columbus. The Knights of Columbus, KFC, is a global Catholic fraternal service order founded by Blessed Michael J. McGivney. I'm taking that to be a... Blessed means that he's now regarded as a saint. Miracles have occurred in connection to something about him. He's been beatified. Membership is limited to practicing Catholic men. The organization is named after the explorer Christopher Columbus. Now, I'm pointing out the Knights of Columbus, but it isn't going to apply just to them. The organization, a Catholic fraternal service founded by somebody who has been beatified, is named after the explorer Christopher Columbus. Now, it's after midnight and it's the 14th of October. In growing up, I seem to remember that we usually celebrated Columbus Day. I know in October, the 10th? Is that the traditional date? CNN. Centuries-old mystery of Christopher Columbus' true origin revealed in a study. It was on Spanish television a day or two ago. Yeah. You've heard about this. The 15th century, which means 1492, 15th century explorer Christopher Columbus, this is Reuters News Service, was a Sephardic Jew from Western Europe. Spanish scientists said on Saturday, after using DNA analysis to tackle a centuries-old mystery. His DNA says Sephardic Jew. Several countries have argued over the origins and the final burial place of the divisive figure Columbus, who led Spanish-funded expeditions from 1490s onward, opening the way for the European conquest of the Americas. Many historians, and this is what I heard all of my life, many historians have questioned the traditional theory that Columbus came from Genoa, Italy. And then they speculated on, for example, my father's mother was from Genoa, Italy. Now, all of my grandparents had passed before I was born. My father told me that his mother said that she was born in a building, a house, next to where Columbus was born. You can see why I'm interested. Now, my mind will stray a little bit, but when I worked in Mexico in the early 1990s at a research institute, there was an Italian scientist couple, man and wife and their kids, that were on contract there for a while. And one day when I was talking to her, I told her just what I said to you. My father's mother was born in a building next to where Columbus was born. And she smiled and laughed, and then she said, this is in Italian, but not from Genoa, she said, all the Genoese say that. So the people of Genoa are proud of Columbus. Now, to solve the mystery of who Columbus was, researchers conducted a 22-year investigation led by a forensic expert by testing tiny samples of remains buried in a Seville cathedral. Columbus's body went first to the Americas, moved to, and but finally came back to Spain. Tiny samples of remains buried in a Seville cathedral, long marked by authorities there as the last resting place of Columbus, though there have been rival claims. Now, the researchers compared them with his DNA that they presumed to be actually from Columbus. They compared those samples' results with known relatives. Yes, there are descendants of Columbus's son, Diego, living in Spain today. With known relatives and descendants, and their finding, and where Diego, his son, is buried, they sampled him too. And their findings were announced in a documentary titled Columbus DNA, The True Origin, and it was on Spain's national broadcaster TVE on Saturday, this past Saturday. We have DNA from Christopher Columbus, very partial, but sufficient. We have DNA from Hernando Colon, his son. Oh, did I say Diego? Both the Y chromosome male and in the mitochondrial DNA transmitted by the mother of the son, there are traits compatible with Jewish origin. You know, 23andMe is bankrupted and shut down, and there's a big controversy right now. What will happen to all those DNA samples that people have submitted to do, and it's more than just them, to try to figure out where were all your ancestors from? As a matter of fact, just 4 days ago, I was talking with somebody in Franklinville, and he told me he had had his DNA analyzed, and he enumerated all of the places his ancestors most likely came from, and that most of them he could confirm the analysis was correct. There was only one, maybe, out of 6 different origins, geographically, countries. Countries, not towns. There are traits compatible with Jewish origin. Now, around 300,000 Jews lived in Spain before the Isabel and Fernando ordered Jews and Muslims to convert to the Catholic faith. The year is 1492. The first edict of expulsion and the second edict of expulsion. And what did those edicts say? Jews and Muslims convert to the Catholic faith or leave now. You have 1 month. And I can tell you that the majority of the Spanish Jews, not all, the majority, moved to Portugal. You know where that is. But they were expelled from Portugal 10 years later. Many settled around the world. The word Sephardic comes from Sepharad, which is the Hebrew word for Spain. Back then, yes, Spain was known. That's where we get Sephardic Jews, the word in English. Ashkenaz, in Hebrew, is the word for what we today call Germany. That's why they're called Ashkenazi Jews. They're two, and by the way, there's also what are known as the Mizrahi, the ones Iraq, Iran, and further. And the Jews of Rome don't belong to any of those 3 groups. Now, there's the cathedral in Seville. And what you see there, the coffin up top, is the remains of Columbus. That's where they sampled. But the point is, they sampled from his son and also living descendants. So their conclusion is that Columbus was born in Western Europe, which would include Spain, but not exclusively. And they've confirmed that the remains in the Seville Cathedral are in fact from Columbus, because they could compare it to his son and to the descendants. You see, the reason there was controversy is Columbus died in Spain in 1506, but wished to be buried on the island of Hispaniola, which today is what? Dominican Republic and Haiti. Is Haiti in the news? Is the Dominican Republic known in baseball fairly well? His remains were taken there in 1542, then moved to Cuba in 1795, and then it was thought to Seville, Spain in 1898. And they've confirmed that what is in Seville is Columbus, based on DNA analysis comparison to his known buried son in Spain and his descendants who are alive today. Now, why am I emphasizing this? His body is in a cathedral, and the researchers say he was a Jew, or at least he was born from somebody who was a Jew. So what I did is I went to Google search. See, I'm having fun with this, and I have a reason. As I explained to the person in Franklinville. This has been an ongoing kind of interest. As I explained to an acquaintance in Franklinville who spent some time in Portugal, I had a kibbutz mother in Israel, Yafa, a wonderful woman. And once we discussed her, she was born in Jerusalem and grew up there. And she told me that at home the family spoke Ladino. You've heard of that. I've made videos about that. Ladino. That's what I said to him. Ladino was Spanish as spoken by the Jews in Spain in 1492 that were expelled. And they carried that version of Spanish with them in exile, in their wanderings. So somehow, some Jews who decided to get out of Spain in 1492, the descendants ended up at least 7 generations ago in Jerusalem, still speaking Ladino, speaking Spanish as they had in Spain in 1492. And were there others? I was in a kibbutz Ulpan learning Hebrew, and when I got to know my buddy from Istanbul, when we had both learned enough Hebrew to be able to speak each other, because he didn't know English, and I don't know Turkish, and when I asked him what language did you speak at home growing up, he said Ladino. So his family, way back, got it? So I went to Google search, and I simply put in Columbus was a Jew. Not Columbus was a Catholic. Columbus was a Jew. And I wanted to see what the search engine was going to say 2 days after the news articles about that Spanish television program. The 22-year investigation by DNA scientists. Famed explorer Christopher Columbus was likely Spanish and Jewish, according to a new genetic study conducted by Spanish scientists that aimed to shed light on a centuries-old mystery. 11 hours ago, BBC. Title is Columbus Probably Spanish and Jewish, study says. So the AI gets into this, and here are other questions that you might ask. Let's have some fun. What culture was Christopher Columbus from? Christopher Columbus was born in the Italian seaport of Genoa in 1451 to a family of wool weavers. My father's mother went to work in a Genoa silk mill where they used silk to produce expensive fabric. She went to work in a Genoa silk mill at 10 years old. I'm saying that so that you understand that what they're saying here about wool weavers fits in with something even from my own family. What would you do with wool weavers? Make clothing? He went to sea at an early age and was an experienced sailor by his 20s, according to the Royal Museum at Greenwich, England. So that's authoritative. What was Christopher Columbus's real name? Now, I can tell you what it is in Spanish. Cristobal Colon. If you go and look at a map of Central America, you'll see a city there, C-O-L-O-N, with an accent on the second O. Christopher Columbus, whose real name was Cristoforo Colombo, is that a TV character I remember from growing up, was born in 1451 in the Republic of Genoa, part of what is now Italy. And that data is from October 9th, 2023, from biography.com. What religion was Christopher Columbus? See, we're having fun with the new discovery. The previously widely held theory was that Columbus was born in Genoa. Notice how this is just 11 hours ago from the BBC. But it is now believed he lived in Spain, likely Valencia. I've been to Valencia. They have a cathedral there that's still under construction after 100 years and beautiful, and was Jewish. What ethnicity was Christopher Columbus? Was an Italian trader, explorer, and navigator. This is Wikipedia now. Oh, they're going to have to revise this. He was born in Genoa, and it's his real name, but so they're saying he was Italian, like my father's side of the family. Never mind that. What heritage was Christopher Columbus? Now, notice what's happening. This is AI picking out stuff. It's creating the questions with no human intervention, and then it's going and finding, or it's maybe creating the question based on crap that it's trying to regurgitate. Christopher Columbus was born in Genoa of Italian parents in 1451, and it has been insisted that he was a full-blooded Spaniard, a Catalan, or a Jew of Portuguese or Catalan descent, but the evidence suggests that he was a Catholic of Genoese origin. Now, what that says is that there has been an ongoing debate, discussion, suspicion about who he really was. This is not new. It's been going on for a couple of 100 years, actually. What religion did Christopher Columbus want to spread? Another achievement that Columbus is awarded is the spread of Christianity, more specifically the spread of Catholicism. Do you remember what the Inquisition was? Oh, that was going on in Spain in that century too. Are there still descendants of Columbus? There is a direct descendant of Christopher Columbus alive today, but that's from Quora. But the scientists said there are. Now, Jewish News Syndicate. Experts advise caution about report Christopher Columbus was Jewish. This is from the Jewish News Syndicate. Now there's the casket and the whatever in the Seville Cathedral. And I can tell by the author's name, Menachem, that he's Jewish. The DNA issue, so this article must have been written in the last 24 hours. The DNA issue that focuses on the so-called tomb of Columbus in Seville is fraught with political issues pertaining to national pride, says Ori Soltis of Georgetown University. This was written on October 13th. It's after midnight. It is just after 3 a.m. on the 14th. they rushed to write this article. Now let's take a look at it. For many years, guides leading visitors on tours of Jewish history in Spain have shared rumors that Christopher Columbus was Jewish. So again, they're saying this idea that he might have been a Jew has been under the covers talk for a really long time. A new documentary that garnered worldwide press coverage ahead of Columbus Day on Monday. Oh, it's Columbus Day. See, I said I couldn't remember what the date was. I knew it would be on a Monday. From when I was a kid. States that DNA evidence proves the explorer was a member of the tribe. Member of the tribe. That's how Jews refer to themselves. How many tribes of Israel were there? What happened to them? The tribes of, right? That's where the phrase comes from. But experts told JNS, Jewish News Service, that such a claim should be taken with a grain of salt. Then they reiterate what I've told you before, like the CNN and BBC and so on, reiterating what was on that television program. And they even quote that I read. And there's even something in the New York Post, the BBC, Fox News. Fox News, Columbus remains verified after 500 years, show he was Jewish. And then somebody says, this guy, Jonathan Ray, professor of Jewish studies at Georgetown University, the recent DNA evidence regarding Columbus is very interesting and helps to illuminate his biography and the era in which he lived. I would offer one caveat. While it indicates that Columbus had Jewish heritage, it does not indicate that Columbus was a professing Jew. In other words, maybe he really was a Catholic, in which case the Knights of Columbus don't have to worry about anything. You see what we're working up to? According to this professor, who's the author of the 2023 book, Jewish Life in Medieval Spain, that's why they went to him. He's an authority on that period in the 15th century and a little later. There is no proof that Columbus lived a Jewish life. Now pay attention to that sentence. This is why I picked out this article. There is no proof that Columbus lived a Jewish life, not even as a crypto-Jew. And the historical record indicates he was a Catholic. Now let's go a little further. I may have to educate you. Rather, it would seem to indicate that he was a converso. What does that mean? Or new Christian, as they were often called. That is, a descendant of Iberian Jews, meaning Portugal or Spain or Catalan, or that his family had been Jewish, but he became Catholic or was born Catholic. Baptized in the Catholic Church is what I'm saying. That is, a descendant of Iberian Jews who had converted to Christianity, now listen carefully, who had converted to Christianity under duress during the century leading up to Spain's expulsion of the Jews in 1492. Let me read that to you again so that you grasp it all. We're talking about all of the 15th century, 1400 all the way to 1500. That is, a descendant of Iberian Peninsula Jews who had converted to Christianity, Catholicism, under duress, forced to do it or else be killed. During the century leading up to Spain's expulsion, see, the final thing was Isabella and Ferdinand, Isabella in particular, get out! Muslims too. Okay? In 1492. Some of those conversos remained steadfast to Judaism, albeit in secret, leaving Spain and Portugal to return to Judaism in other lands. Now remember what I said. The edict was 1492. As a matter of fact, the second edict was on the same day as when Columbus set sail. You have 1 month, convert to Catholicism, or get out! Get out! And the bulk of them went to Portugal, but within 10 years, they were expelled from Portugal also. And that's what he's alluding to in that wording. Leaving Spain and Portugal to return to Judaism, come out from being a fake Catholics and saying, I am a Jew, and going to shul, synagogue. Now, some conversos stayed in the Iberian Peninsula, and although they met stiff resistance from their old Christian neighbors, fully embraced Christianity and eventually integrated into Iberian society. We already know of Jewish converts who became important bishops in late medieval Spain. And now it seems we also know a major explorer who also had Jewish roots. So this article says, his family may have been Jewish, but he was a Catholic. No reason to think otherwise. That's really what this article is saying. Be careful. Don't jump to conclusions. Just because there's DNA evidence, sure, he came from Jewish people, but that doesn't mean he was Jewish. Several experts told JNS, Jewish News Service, that the public should regard the claim in the documentary skeptically. This is a story that never dies. Associate Professor of Sephardic Studies at Brandel Revel Graduate School of Jewish Studies, Yeshiva University. For over a century, if not in his own life, since his own lifetime, people have been obsessed with But the key thing that I'm pointing out, they say there's no evidence. And now I'm going to show you why I'm making this video. Now, who paid for the voyages? Columbus's voyages. You had to put up the money, buy the ships, outfit them, get crews, go and do it, pay people. Two of the major, see what it was is they had Queen Isabella pawn her crown jewels. She didn't actually hand them over. She simply signed a note. I owe you, and if I can't pay, I'll give you the crown jewels that I wear as queen. Two of them were conversos. They were Jews who had become Catholics. They lent the money. And the third one was just a Jew. Kind of, considering when the edict was issued, it kind of, but that's the actual history. They know their names and who they were. It was former Jews and a Jew who paid for the Columbian voyages, paid the money up front. Isabella didn't have the money. She pawned her crown jewels. Now, in Spanish, there was a derogatory way of referring to Jews who became conversos who really were still Jews. Do you understand that? They were Jews above ground, but actually, they were Catholics above ground, but underground they were really Jews. They went to church, but they actually observed all the Jewish things at home secretly. And the derogatory word to describe them that grows up in Spanish is the word Marrano. I started hearing about Marrano a really long time ago. What does Marrano mean in Spanish? It means pig, swine. What does the slang word Marrano mean? What is a Spanish Marrano? In medieval Spain, a Christianized Jew or Moor is a Muslim, Jew or Muslim, especially one who merely professed conversion in order to avoid persecution, including being killed. Now, why am I going through this? Do you remember Simon Wiesenthal, the Nazi hunter? He was an Jewish Austrian Holocaust survivor, Nazi hunter, and writer. He survived the Nazi concentration camps, and then afterwards he decided to hunt them down. And among other things, he wrote a book called Sails of Hope. In 1968, Wiesenthal published in German a book translated in 1972 to the title of Sails of Hope, The Secret Mission of Christopher Columbus, which was his first nonfiction book not on the subject of the Holocaust. In the book, Wiesenthal put forward his theory that Christopher Columbus was a Sephardic Jew, Spanish Jew, like Yafa, my kibbutz mother, from Spain, who practiced his religion in secret to avoid persecution. That he wasn't from Genoa, which is what the DNA analysis says. Although he could have been from Genoa, that's Western Europe. Wiesenthal argued that the quest for the New World was not motivated by wealth or fame, but rather by Columbus' desire to find a place of refuge for the Jews. They were being persecuted not only in Spain. There were the Crusades there were Jewish towns and ghettos that were murdered to the ground as the Crusaders went to Jerusalem many years earlier. Sometimes it was tough to be a Jew in Europe, but rather by Columbus's desire to find a place of refuge for the Jews who were suffering immense persecution in Spain at the time, and in 1492 would be subjected to the Edict of Expulsion. See, I've said that before. He also believed that Columbus' concept of sailing west, routes to the east were already known. The routes to India and traders were already there. The Portuguese were doing that. Around the south tip of Africa and on to India and even to China. Goa in India. I've known somebody from Goa. Columbus's concept of sailing west was based on biblical prophecy, certain verses in the book of Isaiah, rather than on any previous geographical knowledge. Some people claim that Columbus actually, when he was a younger guy, got as far as Iceland and Greenland, to Iceland, that he knew that there was something further on from having talked to people in Iceland. But what we're following here is there's no proof that he actually was a practicing Jew, even if it was as a Marrano. This is Wiesenthal's book. There's the cover. It goes on and talks more about it. And then CNN published this article yesterday also. Was Columbus secretly a Jew? Now that kind of title says, yeah, he was a Catholic above ground when he was before the Queen and King. When he was on those sailing, yeah, as far as his crew knew, he was a practicing Catholic. They all had prayers together, whatever, with the rosaries and the whole thing. But this person, who apparently has done a lot of research on it, says, this is the guy, there's something interesting in this article. The Jews who were forced to renounce Judaism and embrace Catholicism were known as converts. There were also those who feigned conversion, practicing Catholicism outwardly while covertly practicing Judaism, the so-called Marranos, or swine. See, that's the Spanish word for them, pigs. You can think of why, see, pigs are not kosher, right? Tens of thousands of Marranos, those who were discovered to be secret Jews, were tortured by the Spanish Inquisition. They were pressured to offer names of friends and family members who were ultimately paraded in front of crowds, tied to stakes, and burned alive. Their land and personal possessions were then divvied up by the church and crown. I'm giving you a taste of what life was like for Jews in Spain at that time. Columbus, who was known in Spain as Christopher Colon and didn't speak Italian, signed his last will and testament on May 19, 1506, and made 5 curious and revealing provisions. Now we're talking about the actual before-death will by Christopher Columbus. Two of his wishes: tithe 1/10 of his income to the poor, and provide an anonymous dowry for poor girls, are part of Jewish customs. That doesn't prove anything. He also decreed to give money to a Jew who lived at the entrance of the Lisbon Jewish quarter. Now let me explain that. You've heard of Venice. You know that the Venice merchants and their navies were great explorers to the east, sailing, trading, and all that kind of stuff. That's what Venice was known for in the 15th, 16th, 17th century. But they were good Catholics, and they didn't believe in charging interest for money. It was against their religion. But they needed to work money in their trading and in loans and things like that. Think of the voyages, somebody had to finance them. So they had to get somebody who would do that stuff that wasn't a Christian. Jews. And so they built a ghetto, you can visit it today, in Venice, where the Jews had to live, the ones that they had. And there was only a limited number of them. And every 2 years, the rabbi had to renew the contract with the Italian Venetian merchant class. And one of the rules was, Jews had to be back in the ghetto by nightfall. And they had to pay for a Christian guard to guarantee that they all would get in, and the doors to the ghetto, which was walled, would be closed and locked, keeping them in at night. Columbus also decreed to give money to a Jew who lived at the entrance to the Lisbon Jewish quarter. And from that you might imply from what I've just told you what that guy's job was. The word ghetto, G-H-E-T-T-O, is Italian, even though we use it directly in English. And what it means is foundry, brass foundry. There was an island on the outskirts of the growing city of Venice where the people smelted brass to make cannons, boom, 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 to make cannons, and all that debris. And that's where they decided to build the Jewish ghetto, on the trash heap, with a wall around it and water on all sides, an island. Okay? Just telling you how it was. And what did they use the Jews for? The money trade, contracts, to charge interest, because the Christians wouldn't do it. It's against their religion. So you get somebody else to do it. Now, on these documents, now here's the key part. There are many handwritten letters, documents written by Columbus himself. Still exist. On these documents, written by Columbus, Columbus used a triangular signature of dots and letters that resembled inscriptions found on the gravestones of Jewish cemeteries in Spain. Let me say it again. Columbus used a triangular signature of dots and letters that resembled inscriptions found on gravestones of Jewish cemeteries in Spain. He ordered his heirs to use the signature in perpetuity. He used it, and he said, I want my descendants to. According to British historian Cecil Roth's The History of the Marranos, what's the Marrano? The secret Jew in Spain. The anagram was a cryptic substitute for the Kaddish, a prayer recited in the synagogue by mourners after the death of a close relative. Thus, Columbus's subterfuge allowed his sons to say Kaddish in their crypto-Jewish, when their crypto-Jewish father died, when their Marrano father died, Columbus. Finally, Columbus left money to support the crusade. He hoped his successors would take up to liberate the Holy Land, to free Jerusalem from the Muslims' hands. What do you think all that stuff that's going on with Hezbollah and Iran and all that? They want to get the Jews out of Jerusalem. It's still going on, folks. What was the Crusades? The Crusades were to liberate Jerusalem from the Muslims. It's still all going on. Estelle Izari, a linguistics professor at Georgetown University, has analyzed the language and syntax of hundreds of handwritten letters diaries, and documents of Columbus. Let me repeat that. Analyzed the language and syntax of hundreds of handwritten letters, diaries, and documents of Columbus, so he was educated, and concluded that the explorer's primary written and spoken language was Castilian Spanish. She explains the 15th century Castilian Spanish was the Yiddish of Spanish Jewry known as Ladino. Yeah, the dialect of my kibbutz mother was specifically the Castilian version of Spanish in the Iberian Peninsula. Yes, there were different dialects. There are 5 different Italian dialects. Yes, there are dialects in the United States. Yeah. At the top left corner of all but one of the 13 letters written by Columbus to his son Diego contained the handwritten Hebrew letters Bet Hey. Let's repeat it. This is an independent person that has gone through the archive of things directly written by Columbus. At the top left corner of all but one of the 13 letters written by Columbus to his son Diego contained the handwritten Hebrew letters Bet Hey, meaning Be'eretz Hashem. Hashem means the name of God. With God's help, Be'eret. Observant Jews for centuries customarily added this blessing to their letters. No letters to outsiders, people that weren't his son, hundreds of them, no letters to outsiders bear this mark. And the one letter to Diego in which it was omitted was meant to be handed to King Ferdinand. And then this article goes on to talk about Wiesenthal and Sails of Hope. Do I think that Christopher Columbus was a Marrano Jew? Yeah, I sure do. It's right there. From his own handwritten letters, he was an underground Jew. And so that gives to me substance to Wiesenthal's conjecture. In Columbus's day, Jews widely believed that Jerusalem had to be liberated and the temple rebuilt for the Messiah to come. Nothing has changed. That's one of the controversial issues today in Israel, in Jerusalem. When will the temple be rebuilt? When will the Messiah come? Of course, if you're a Catholic, Jesus has already come. And I wasn't starting off with the Knights of Columbus to belittle them. They are a part of my growing up. From this TV program explaining the 22 years of DNA research, I'm wondering what the repercussions are going to be. And there certainly is going to be back and forth. And we already have some people saying, be careful, but I never heard of this guy before. He's an entrepreneur, he's a smart guy, but the thing about it is, let's do it right now. I haven't done this. Wikipedia. Apparently she's passed, 2017. Estelle Izari is a Costa Rican professor emeritus of Hispanic literature at Georgetown University. Oh, I have never even looked at this. She was one of the first historians to provide objective evidence based on scientific criteria and methodology to solve the mysteries surrounding the identity of Christopher Columbus. Maybe I'll get her book. In 2009, this is the first time I'm reading it, she presented the book, The DNA of the Writing of Christopher Columbus. In Madrid, she concludes that Columbus wrote in Catalan, dialect of Spanish, which, when the Jews left to exile, became Ladino, and was a Jewish convert. After researching Columbus's letters, she notes that some are punctuated with semicolons and periods, and their style of punctuation obeyed a geographic arrangement that those in Castile did not use commas, as was typical of Castilian-speaking lands of the old crown of Aragon. And she added, in the book, the navigator's writing system is compared to manuscripts from ... and the DNA points to Iberia. Now, wait a minute. So what is it saying? Oh, this is interesting. Oh, wait a minute. Look at this. Wikipedia. Oh, this is unexpected. Whoever wrote this, it was probably AI. You would think she was one of the first historians to provide objective evidence based on scientific criteria and methodology to solve the mystery surrounding the identity of Christopher Columbus, and then the AI jerk-off ends up just winding itself into nonsense. There's supposed to be another couple of paragraphs telling what her conclusion was, and it leaves it out. Ooh, either the person who did this was AI and has no brain. Think of what Google is doing now with the AI summary. Or they intentionally left it out because it was too dangerous to say that Christopher Columbus was a Marrano. We'll have to leave it there. I'm going to have to see if I can get this book. But that book is clearly what this guy was using to write this opinion piece. Well, if you stuck with me, what do you think? Was Columbus a Marrano? Steve A.B. Foriel. I've shown you that this idea about everyone, all the Genoese say that. All the Genoese say that. It starts as a kid. All the Genoese say that. Born in the house next to where Columbus was born. It's not of a, oh, suddenly it's an interesting idea. Steve A.B. Foriel, just having fun, saying see you in 73.